Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. This is Andrew Conley, and we're pleased to have you for this biodiesel webinar this afternoon. I'm going to go over a couple of quick welcome items at the front end before we get into the real heart of our conversation. So again, I'm Andrew Conley. I'm the Consulting Services Director with Clean Fuels Ohio. I will be serving as the MC for today's webinar. Clean Fuels Ohio, as hopefully many of you know, we are a Department of Energy Clean Cities Coalition. We're a nonprofit, and our mission is to help deploy alternative fuels and efficiency technologies to improve energy efficiency and environmental outcomes for fleets and individual motorists throughout the state. And so biodiesel and biofuels in general are a great solution for a lot of fleets that we'll be hearing more about today. So in terms of our agenda today, I'll be providing these brief welcoming comments. We will be reserving questions to the end. Each of you have a chat box in your webinar software, so please, it should say questions. You can type your questions into that box as we present, and then I'll be restating those questions out loud, and we'll be answering those questions at the tail end of our presentations. Then after this welcome, I'll introduce Benchmark Biodiesel. Paige Thorson will be our main presenter on biodiesel for this webinar. We're also joined by the Franklin County Engineers Office. Jeff Markusik from Franklin County will share some of their success with using biodiesel. I will also touch base at the tail end on some grants that are available for diesel vehicle replacement, so you can get that new diesel vehicle partially funded and fuel it with biodiesel, as well as some free recognition programs, including the Ohio Green Fleets program that Clean Fuels Ohio runs. And then we'll wrap up with answering your questions. So that's our agenda for today. As I just mentioned, our main speaker for today is Paige Thorson, who is the CEO of Benchmark Biodiesel. Benchmark's been a long-term stakeholder with Clean Fuels Ohio and has been successfully working with a wide variety of fleets to implement biodiesel in various blends. And so I'd like to turn the presentation over to Paige at this time. We appreciate Benchmark's partnership and good work in the biodiesel arena. Paige?
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks everyone who's online with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about biodiesel this afternoon. My name is Paige Thorson, as Andrew said. I'm the Benchmark Biodiesel. We're a small business located in Columbus, Ohio. Started about 10 years ago because we saw a need for infrastructure for biodiesel blending and delivery around our area, around the state of Ohio and around the Midwest. And so we decided to make the effort to refurbish an old fuel terminal and turn it into a biodiesel blending terminal, which I'll tell you a little bit more about as we go. So we've had the company about 10 years, and we've had great success fueling fleets in our area with the biodiesel. Next slide. There it goes. So I'm going to give you an overview of biodiesel to begin with, just kind of let you know how it's made and what it does. So biodiesel, I'll start with the biodiesel that we use here in Ohio and at Benchmark Biodiesel is made from soybean oil. So farmers had an issue years ago where when they were crushing all the soybeans they needed to make the meal for animals and other supplies that they needed, they had an overabundance of soybean oil. So they took that, someone came with the idea of that, could that oil be made into a fuel? It was kind of an old idea, but it had never really been fully pursued. So our biodiesel is made out of soybean oil. It's grown, crushed, and processed here in Ohio. The plant is in Cincinnati. Soybeans are grown all over, and we have crushing facilities, all over the place in Ohio. So it's a great job builder for our agricultural industry, our trucking industry, and people like us who do distribution of biodiesel. we find soybean oil works the best where we are. Just as an aside, biodiesel can be made out of other forms of oils. In the South, they might use yellow grease or beef tallow or other different what they call feedstocks, which is the base of the biodiesel. Andrew, would you do the next slide? I'm having a little trouble getting it to move. Thank you. So biodiesel is a drop-in replacement for diesel. It's made from soybean oil, which is a byproduct of the soybeans, like we just discussed. We call it a renewable fuel, and the reason we call it a renewable fuel is that there's really no end to the amount that you can create. It's grown as a crop in the field. It can be done year after year after year. It differentiates from a fossil fuel or some other alternative fuels in the fact that there's no reason it would ever run out. We could do lots, and like I said, soybeans are great where we are because they're so plentiful, but they use all different, like in Canada, they use rapeseed oil, which is really canola. There's all different palm oil out in Malaysia. So different feedstocks can be used depending on what's readily available in your area. So let's go through how biodiesel is made. Biodiesel is made, it has to be heated and it has to be mixed. So you take what's called the feedstock. In this case, we're going to talk about soybean oil. Soybean oil grown and crushed, not soybean oil, you mix it with methanol or ethanol and a catalyst. It has to be heated to a very high temperature, mixed, and then it becomes fuel. There's been a misconception that maybe you could just use vegetable oil straight. They call it SVO, straight vegetable oil, in a truck and a diesel equipment, which isn't advisable in the long run. This makes a really, really nice fuel. Next, they water wash the fuel to get rid of the excess methanol, so that all the engine problems are eliminated. Our biodiesel, you can see the photo kind of in the middle of the screen there, is distilled. It's a final step that not everyone takes. It's not an absolute necessity, but we find it is by far the best process for biodiesel in the northern states. Distillation takes all the impurities and all the glycerin. You can see at the bottom of the beaker there, 10% glycerin. We would like to get all the glycerin out just from the fact that it eliminates any gelling issues that you might have with biodiesel. So we have chosen to use distilled biodiesel. You can see it's colorless. It's not even yellow or any color. It has almost no smell, maybe smells a little bit like a French fryer if it's running in your truck. But other than that, it's pretty much odorless and non-toxic. We wanted to run through a few misconceptions about biodiesel. Biodiesel, really the industry got started maybe in the mid 1990s. And so some people had some mixed reviews on the original forms of biodiesel in the late 90s and early 2000s. So we wanted to go through a few of these misconceptions just to talk about how much things have changed. Just the photo on the right is someone's garage, biodiesel maker. And some of these forms of biodiesel were getting out and being used, and they weren't always tremendously successful. So the number one thing we want to say, I said earlier, it's not raw soybean oil. That's not what you want to use. It needs to be processed and it needs to be washed. Those two things are really important. We like to take the third step and see that it's distilled. So it's not raw vegetable oil. Sometimes people get ethanol confused with biodiesel. Ethanol it goes with gasoline. Think of it that way. Ethanol is mixed with gasoline. It's made from corn. Biodiesel is made from soybean oil or other oils, but it is always mixed with diesel. So I kind of think of ethanol and biodiesel sort of like cousins. Ethanol is the corn and gasoline side, and we're the soy and diesel side. Biodiesel does not perform as well as diesel. It's another thing we hear a lot of our prospective customers thinking, but biodiesel does perform as well as diesel. As a matter of fact, it has a higher cetane level than diesel and adds lubricity to the diesel. A 20% blend has very similar fuel economy, horsepower, everything as a diesel fuel. most people that make the switch to biodiesel don't notice any difference in performance. Winter issues. This is something that was a valid concern at the beginning of the biodiesel industry. That's why we're so careful with the kind of biodiesel that we use now. If you use a high quality, especially distilled biodiesel and blend it properly, there's no reason it can't work at 20% level, even in the coldest winter. Even in some of the very, very cold states, they're running biodiesel at a 20% level. 5%, which we call B5 biodiesel, should have no impact at all on cold weather operability. As a matter of fact, in Ohio, all of the truck stops and other distributors they're not obligated to label if there's up to 5% biodiesel in the fuel. So you may be running it now if you have a diesel without knowing it. But we're very careful to label. We like ours to be, we're proud of our diesel. We like it to all be labeled exactly at the blend level. What else? Oh, biodiesel will plug my engine filters. Another concern we hear a lot. If you were to run 100% biodiesel, it would have a solvent effect in your engine and would release some deposits. So that could be an issue if you ran a very, very high blend. But if you're really just looking to run anywhere in the 5 to 20% blend range, I don't think you're going to see any difference or any plugging of your engine filters. But Jeff Marcusic can tell us more about their experience with all this. And the last thing is biodiesel will avoid an engine warranty. Manufacturers now do certify biodiesel up to 20% in their engine warranties. So you can check with your particular one, but we haven't seen an issue anymore with this. They will go ahead and certify it up to 20%. So we wanted to talk about what will biodiesel do for your community. Biodiesel is, like we said earlier, a drop-in fuel, which means there's no outlay of money, capital. You don't have to replace equipment. It can run in any diesel right now. And you can see from our chart on the left that it immediately improves air quality everywhere it's used. We ran these numbers at a 20% B20 biodiesel blend. And you can see it immediately reduces carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, and hydrocarbons. At a 20% level, it immediately reduces. If you're interested to see how much reduction in emissions your fleet could possibly achieve, the EPA has a calculator where you can plug in the number of gallons that you use per year, let's say, or a month, or whatever you'd like to do, and substitute with a biodiesel blend, and you can see right off the bat what you would save as far as emissions in your community. It reduces your carbon footprint by using 20% less diesel right off the bat, and it runs in any diesel engine. There's no modification, and you will see a little additional lubrication in the engine. We wanted to talk about some of our customers that are using biodiesel and have been using biodiesel. The city of Columbus has been using biodiesel for many years with great success. They this past year went to 20% biodiesel year round in their fire trucks, in their trash trucks, any diesel equipment that they use, any heavy diesel snow plows. And they had used to use 5% biodiesel for half the year during the warm weather months, or 20% in the warm weather months, switched to 5% in the cold weather. This year they decided to take the leap and go to 20% biodiesel year round, and had a wonderful winter, no problems. Everything was great. The Ohio State universities, all their buses run on 20% biodiesel year round and have for about 10 years or more. Franklin County Engineers Office, who we have with us on the panel today, switched to biodiesel last year, and they can tell us about their experience with it. Swaco is another customer around town that uses biodiesel. We also sell to, just to give you a general idea, farmers use biodiesel. construction companies. We have many different kind of areas where biodiesel has been very successful. So what's the key to biodiesel success? If you want to make a change and switch to biodiesel, we want to make sure that there were two things that you kept in mind. Because I know not all of you are from Ohio. If you're here, we're happy to help you with anything you might need. But in your area, what would you want to look for? Number one is quality biodiesel. Really, there has been a huge leap in the availability of quality biodiesel around the country. Use distilled biodiesel if you're in the north. It makes a lot of sense. It works very, very well, and you're going to eliminate any gelling issues that might concern you. There's something called BQ 9000. It's a certification for biodiesel that ensures it's of the highest quality. It's a rating. You could look for BQ 9000. We don't recommend using animal fat biodiesel or yellow grease biodiesel. This is specifically for the northern states. In the south, you may have better success with that than we would here where we have cold weather. You don't want to end up with something in your tank in September, October, and all of a sudden it's cold and it's not the right, what we like to call feedstock. So soybean oil, and they make biodiesel out of corn oil now. So number two, we would say, think about how it's blended. If you use a distributor, make sure to have a discussion and make sure that they are blending it in a way that makes sense. We use a computerized blending system called ratio blending. You can see our tanks and our little our hut that does the blending right there. And what we do is it's called a ratio blend because it comes at a high velocity and emulsifies the fuel right into the truck so that it never ever could split. It ends up being emulsified and it blends just perfectly. We put our additives in as it's going through the ratio blending process, so it makes for a very nice fuel blend. We also heat and insulate our tanks to make sure that it is at the exact right temperature in the winter, so that it will blend properly. So just make sure that you talk with whoever your distributor is and make sure they are blending it in a way that is, you don't want them going to one place to get the biodiesel, another place to get the diesel, and just letting it kind of rock around in the truck and hoping it blends. You want to make sure that it's blended all together in one spot. There's a little checklist of things you can look for and avoid on the right. If you'd like to look back at that later, it can show you some things you want to make sure you get when you're looking for biodiesel. Here's a few of our segments, of our customer segments: school buses, fire trucks. There's a SWACO truck and the Ohio State buses. We do snow plows, construction equipment on road projects, and they've all had good success with biodiesel with no gelling issues or any other equipment issues at all. That's just a little review of what the air quality and health improvements are by using biodiesel. It reduces the carbon footprint, definitely helps with air quality. It's considered non-toxic if there were a spill. It doesn't have any hazardous labeling or anything like that because it is so pure. It's clean burning, it's sustainable, renewable, and it's made in Ohio. Ours, all the products that go into our biodiesel are made in Ohio, which is a nice thing for our economy here in Ohio. Oh, and you won't need any modification for your engine, which is another benefit. You don't have to put any money into it initially. So the last question that and most importantly for many of us is, what's the cost? Biodiesel has cost the same or less than diesel almost always for the last 10 years or so. There was a little blip in 2012 where there was a switch up where biodiesel went a little bit higher than diesel. But in general, we have not had that issue since, and it's been a really good value for people who would like to switch and start to reduce emissions for their fleet wherever they are. So we deliver directly to customers. I'm sure if you're in another state, that they have the same type of delivery that you could find there. If you'd ever need help sourcing biodiesel in another state, get in touch with us. We have a lot of connections through the National Biodiesel Board, and hope that you'll consider biodiesel. For the cost, it's really one of the quickest, least expensive, and easiest ways to get started into alternative fuels and reducing emissions. So thanks. I appreciate it, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Paige. Appreciate that presentation. Biodiesel does remain a great drop-in solution, is what we call it, because it can drop into your existing fueling infrastructure and your existing vehicles with really no modifications for a lot of success. So to talk about that success, we're joined today by Jeff Markusik, who is the fleet superintendent for the Franklin County Engineers Office. As Paige said, a lot of folks have been using biodiesel around Ohio, and one of the newest members of that community is the Franklin County Engineer. So I'd like to turn it over to Jeff now to share his experience from a fleet manager's side in implementing biodiesel through that process. So Jeff, tell us about how biodiesel has been working for the engineer's office.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. Basically, I'm in the same boat as most of you probably on here. We are looking for a way to get greener, but still be fiscally responsible. I should give you a little timeline. Basically, we got a new Franklin County engineer in June of 2017, Cornell Robertson, and then I became fleet superintendent in April 2018. And one of the first things he tasked me with was to get the fleet greener, but also be fiscally responsible. So we started reaching out to different local organizations. First, we worked with MEMA. It's a Municipal Equipment Maintenance Association. Real good organization to belong to if you're not. Went from there to met Andrew. Attended our first Midwest Green Fleet Forum and Expo, and we started looking at all the alternative fuels that were available to us. It really stood out. Biodiesel stood out. We, attended a class or a session on that. What really attracted to it was it met our fleets. We didn't have to do. At least they were selling it as you didn't have to make any adjustments to your fleet. So that was really attractive. We really weren't looking into changing the fleet over from diesel to compressed natural gas or anything else. It was just too cost inhibitive. So we spoke to Andrew Moore. We spoke to Kelly Regan. He's a fleet administrator at the City of Columbus. We spoke to Swaco. We really did our homework. We went out there, read every white paper on the internet we could find, spoke to anybody that had experience with biodiesel. Of course, spoke to Paige and Wade at Benchmark. When we kind of rolled this out to people here at the county engineer's office, biodiesel in the past had kind of a bad name. Everybody had some story of an uncle or a cousin or a farmer that had some bad experience with it. But the more research we did, we learned that today's biodiesel is a whole nother animal. And we just basically came back and educated ourselves and our staff with facts over myths. So our business expense in this whole thing, starting out, April 2019, we switched over to B20. We have 3 locations here at the engineer's office with above ground vaults, 10,000 gallon and then 2 8,000 gallons. We had them all cleaned. The diesel fuel was taken out, cleaned, put back in. And since that day, we went through approximately, let me look at my numbers here, about 55,000 gallons of B20 and 21,000 gallons of B5. We were playing a little safe as it got a little colder. In September, I moved to the B5. I figured with the B5 and the B20 what we had in there, we'd be fine. And then in September, we went back to B20 again. A little bit about our fleet. We have about 44, what I'd call like class 6, class 7 tandem axle and single axle plow trucks. Another 25 yellow steel that run diesel, another probably 15 medium duty like F550s with diesel, 8 skid steers, 17 tractors, 5 different excavators, everything from 260 Komatsu to the little mini hose. We also ran the biodiesel, which we got a little pushback from some of the manufacturers on our hot boxes. We used where we normally heat with the diesel. They're like, oh, little pushback from it. We haven't had a problem, and now over a year running that in there, hitting that, and also hitting our 2 car distributors. So, we're real worried going into this, like they said about filters and everything else. We have no verifiable problem with filters or any other mechanical issues that we could even start to say that it was because of the biodiesel. We've been just real happy. It's been easy. City of Columbus had a nice contract we were able to jump onto. I know now ODOT has a contract you can jump onto. Same price that we pay for regular diesel. It was just the lowest hanging fruit. It just made it easy. We didn't have to do any crazy dynamics, and we've been real pleased. And we'll probably, depending on how brave I am, we might go to B20 all year long this winter. So that's basically where we're at. It was cost effective and easy, and it just has worked for Brent County engineers.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate your leadership in taking the engineer's office in this direction, and glad it's been working out well for you. So thank you for sharing that success story with us and the participants today, Jeff. Appreciate your work and partnership. Now I'd like to just touch base as part of the agenda on some grants and incentives that are available in a free recognition program that Clean Fuels Ohio runs. So like I mentioned, we are a nonprofit, and our whole goal is to work with fleets and consumers to adopt cleaner alternative fuels, efficiency technologies, or solutions that essentially improve economic and environmental performance, and biodiesel is certainly one of those. As Paige said, for any of you on the call that may be out of state, Clean Fuels Ohio is one of the U.S. Department of Energy Clean Cities Coalition. So if you are out of state, there is a sister Clean Cities Coalition likely in your region who is connected to biodiesel suppliers in that state. So we certainly welcome opportunities to connect with anyone looking to utilize biodiesel in Ohio. But if you're beyond Ohio's borders, there is a group like ours, a Clean Cities Coalition, that you can work with, and great biodiesel suppliers in your area as well. So with that said, Clean Fuels Ohio does a number of services around fleet analysis and planning, helping to secure grants and incentives, partnering to provide technical trainings, as well as government affairs. So we have a lot of different irons in the fire, and happy to assist fleets wherever can be the most benefit. But what I wanted to talk about now to round out this presentation is a grant program that published yesterday that will provide incentives for diesel vehicle replacement. And then we hope those diesel vehicles can be filled with biodiesel year round, as we've been discussing on this call. In terms of our grant support services, we work to provide webinars and all sorts of informational best practices, competitiveness vetting, and even full grant writing and grant administration services. So for everything I'm about to talk about, all fleets are eligible to apply on their own behalf, but if you need additional assistance, Clean Fuels Ohio stands at the ready to provide that additional assistance. So the big opportunity here, which published yesterday, is the Ohio EPA VW settlement grants. They call it the Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund, and that is funded through a settlement that VW made with the US EPA for their emissions violations, for violating the emission standards. And Ohio gets a certain portion of that. This will be the third round of grants that the state of Ohio has released with this funding. They anticipate, as they say on their website, funding about $12 million in vehicle projects. Again, this grant was just released yesterday, so June 1st, and the application date is August 7th. So you see that kind of highlighted in that box off to the side. So again, they anticipate funding $12 million in vehicle projects. They just released the RFP. They will answer Q&A formally and update that regularly on the website. They are also hosting webinars June 4th and June 9th from the EPA, so you'll see information if you Google their website or search for their website online. You can see links to register for those. Applications are due August the 7th. It's a pretty straightforward online portal and online application, and then they make grant award announcements in October or November. So these would really be projects that you are looking to purchase vehicles in 2021 calendar year. So you can see this map here on the right-hand side of your screen. This is a map of the state of Ohio. These VW grants are limited to the 26 counties that are shaded here. They have first priority and second priority counties. Essentially, these are counties that are in non-attainment or maintenance for federal air quality standards, particularly regarding nitrogen oxide, which is the main emissions that the VW program is looking to reduce. So that's the diesel mitigation. They're looking to reduce those NOx emissions. So unfortunately, the funding is restricted to applicants in these 26 counties. So, you have to operate 75% or more of the time in one or more of these counties. So like if you are based in Franklin County, but also service Delaware, Licking, and Fairfield, that's totally eligible. Or if you go outside of Franklin County from time to time, but are operating inside for 75% of the time, then you are eligible to apply. So just keep that geographic parameter in mind. But there are a variety of funding buckets here for this program. So the overall of this program is looking to fund diesel vehicles, existing diesel vehicles, class 4 through class 8. So from that kind of small work truck, box truck, all the way up to the heaviest duty vehicles. Class 4 through 8 vehicles are eligible. And then you're eligible to either repower an existing vehicle with a cleaner diesel or alternative fuel vehicle conversion, or to replace a vehicle through this program. And all the different categories you can see there. There's categories for school buses, categories for transit buses, categories for what they call local freight, which would include municipalities as well as, even like a benchmark biodiesel that's running around, distributing fuel, any kind of freight vehicles. They also have some off-road equipment, ferries and tugs, switcher locomotives, airport and cargo handling equipment in airports and multimodal facilities. So those are the big categories. You can see this little chart here on the side. They've actually awarded all their marine awards, but they do have significant funding available for the other sectors. So I'm not going to go too far into the weeds on this during this webinar, but again, the program is released already, and Clean Fuels Ohio will be hosting a webinar on June 10th, fully free to attend, where I'll be going into all the weeds on this program, talking about eligibility, different funding levels for the different types of categories, best practices to figure out how to position yourself to be most competitive in submitting an application, lessons learned from the past 2 rounds of the project. So if you have more questions about this, again, we'll be hosting this webinar that you can see here at 11 a.m. on June 10th, and the Ohio EPA themselves will be hosting webinars and Q&A sessions on June 4th and June 9th. So, we can answer a little more in detail in some cases than they can based on past experience. So we can kind of give you our take, where they'll be giving you more of the formal, cut and dried, official answers to the questions. So if you have more detailed information that you want, you can contact me directly or encourage you to join us for the webinar. But then diesel vehicles are eligible for this program, and we hope to, if you do get diesel vehicles, to work with you to deploy biodiesel in them as an easy, cost-effective, and successful solution to even further reduce your emissions there. Before we get to the Q&A portion here, I want to touch base on Clean Fuels Ohio's free recognition program for fleets. So Clean Fuels Ohio runs our Ohio Green Fleets program, and really this is a program that's been running since 2008. The whole goal is just to proactively recognize fleets who are making a difference, who are implementing biodiesel, like Franklin County and City of Columbus are implementing a variety of efficiency and alternative fuel solutions. So we have 100 fleets that we've formally certified through this program. We do formal certifications, but it's completely free. So what we ask for is some baseline information, and then we get more information on the alternative fuel or efficiency solutions that you've been deploying, and we quantify the emission reductions, and then based on overall percent emission reductions for your fleet, we certify you on this 5-star green fleet scale, and we recognize fleets each year at our fall conference, the Midwest Green Transportation Forum and Expo. So it's completely free, and all we do is gather some baseline information and information on what solutions you've implemented, and then we crunch those numbers for you, provide those to you, and if you've met certain thresholds, we recognize a new class of fleets every year. So really one of the kind of high-level ways to think about how the system works is fleets who have deployed about 20% of their fuel use as alternative fuel are pretty much a shoe-in to become at least a 1-star Ohio Green Fleet. So implementing B20 biodiesel is usually the most cost-effective, easiest way for fleets not only to green themselves, but also to get recognition through the Ohio Green Fleets program. So we've recognized a number of fleets over the years as a 1-star green fleet with biodiesel as their starting point. And of those 100 fleets that we've recognized through the program, we just have a great diversity of both public and private fleets, small fleets and large fleets, major companies and municipalities, and smaller entities like school districts and small businesses. So a wide variety of fleets have been certified, and we look forward to certifying more. So I'm the best point of contact at Clean Fuels Ohio if you want to learn more about grants and incentives or about the Ohio Green Fleets program. I'd love to talk to you more. Feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to connect with you. So with that, we have time for some Q&A for the last 15 minutes or so on the call here on the webinar. Before we launch into some of those questions, I just want to give Paige or Jeff an opportunity if there's anything else you wanted to add before we field some questions here. Anything either of you would like to add before jumping into questions?
This is Jeff Marcusic. One thing I did want to add there too is since the Benchmark is also a woman-owned business, that's also very important to us, Franklin County Engineer, to give minority and less privileged businesses a chance. So that played a part in our decision also for going with Benchmark. So that's an important factor in today's, in being better at government and better business. So I just want to make sure we talk about that.
Yeah, appreciate that addition, Jeff. Yeah, and a number of public entities do have requirements to contract with a certain percent of their contracts with woman-owned or minority-owned businesses. So Benchmark certainly fills that box as well.
Yeah, Jeff, for bringing that up. We are certified DBE business in Ohio, WOSB, we're woman-owned business. So if any of those things apply to you and you want to talk to me more about any of that and how to track it, I'm happy to help out with that. We will, they're recording this webinar and we'll put it on our website at www.benchmarkbio.com if you have any more questions, or you can reach us through Clean Fuels Ohio.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple questions to round us out. Jeff mentioned tank cleaning was one of the steps in the Franklin County process to implement biodiesel. Paige, can you speak more to Benchmark's perspective on best practices when implementing vis-a-vis tank cleaning or anything else?
Yeah, we the Franklin County Engineer's Office did a really good, conscientious job of this. Bill Burns at SWACO, who used to work for City of Columbus, he did some great informational sessions on making sure to get your tanks cleaned and free of water before you switch over to biodiesel. If you've done it recently, it's probably fine, but you need to take a look and make sure that everything's clean and ready and dry. You know, there's no water accumulating in your tank, which we occasionally do see and can cause an issue. So yeah, if you're going to switch to diesel, we do recommend making that the time to go ahead and get things organized and get your tanks cleaned.
Yeah, and my understanding is basically the two big things you're looking out for when doing that, like you just mentioned, Paige, are moisture, water content that might have been accumulating in tanks, especially if they're older. And then there are deposits that can be built up from older tanks on diesel use, and biodiesel does have some of those solvency properties, which basically means it's going to slightly clean the tank there. So the tank cleaning eliminates any of that excess moisture, any of that potential buildup, so none of that makes its way into the fuel system of the vehicles. Is that the big bottom line there?
That's right. That's exactly right. The biodiesel will want to absorb some of that water. You just want to make sure that all those things are cleaned out and done with before you switch to biodiesel, and then you won't have any issue with any of it. It's good practice anyway, but it's good time when you switch over. It's probably a good time just to make sure you're up to speed on that.
And I know one of the things Bill Burns emphasized was it was only in switching over to biodiesel that he realized, as one of the managers when he was at City of Columbus, how important tank cleaning would just be on kind of a regular basis, whether they were using biodiesel or not. They just hadn't been instituting those practices, and that just became a occurrence that the fleet did to maintain their facilities generally, and it just happened to be one that they began because of biodiesel, but is something that he kind of recommends as a fleet best practice generally. So beyond tank cleaning, I think you kind of hit on briefly here, and I pulled up this slide, kind of some of the differences with biodiesel handling and storage. So biodiesel as a bio-based fuel, the gelling is something that has been a concern, as you highlighted in the past, especially for different feedstocks or older versions of biodiesel. Can you speak a little bit more to the type of additives that are added and that process to work with the biodiesel product given the different seasons?
Yeah. So that's very true. And even diesel can gel in very, very cold weather. It needs to be additized. So it's something that you'd want to keep track of anyway. But I think that the number one thing we look at is the type of biodiesel. You want to keep an eye on making sure that you get a good quality biodiesel. That's just number one. And Jeff brought up earlier how, he heard from everybody's uncle, cousin, and everyone else that, there was gelling or some trouble with biodiesel. But as long as you have quality biodiesel and you're blending and storing it correctly, there's not going to be an issue with biodiesel. There's just not. So Franklin County engineers done a really good job with that, where they cleaned their tanks, they had everything ready to go, and it's just gone really well over at their facilities. So that's one thing. We actually heat our additives prior to blending, which is a little bit different than most, but since our biodiesel's heated, we actually even heat our additives. We use a really good additive that'll keep it running well in a cold weather, any cold weather situation. But it's important to keep in mind that even diesel could gel if it got cold enough without additizing. So you want to make sure that you do at least that with the biodiesel as well. Wade, do you want to add anything on the biodiesel additives?
No, I think you've covered it. That's excellent. It's really how the winter blending happens on the page you have up right now. If it's blended properly, in addition to putting an excellent winter anti-gel additive in, we injection blend the additive into the gallons as it's going into the delivery truck. So it is totally emulsified, as opposed to a lot of delivery trucks will just dump 2 or 5 or whatever many gallons of additive, cold additive, into somebody's tank after the fact. And we've just found that because it all blends together at almost 500 to 600 gallons a minute into these delivery trucks, everything is emulsified, and the end result is better than anything you can get anywhere. So that's really one of the fantastic reasons that we've had such great success with B20 in the winter. And the city of Columbus can attest to that. I mean, they're running it in every single one of their fire engines, and we have not had a single gelling incident in 11 years. So that's how long we've been in business. There you go.
Yeah. No,
thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so this slide references the BQ 9000 program, and I think you both highlighted some historic developments in the biodiesel industry. Really, when we had the late 90s, early 2000s, there, as Paige, you really referenced, there was a lot of different practices in how biodiesel was produced, how it was stored, how it was blended. But the National Biodiesel Board really came in and established their BQ 9000 program, kind of like a ISO 9000 program for making sure there are these quality practices with each step of the manufacturing, blending, and storage process. So I think you guys have highlighted a number of things related to that in your previous couple comments, but is there anything you would want to add around those kind of industry standards and best practices?
Well, I would just say, if you've had any experience before, anyone on this call, this webinar, with biodiesel, and especially if it was in the very beginning stages, we've met with some customers who said, well, yeah, we used it. It was not a great experience, but then we found it was more like the year 2000 or 2001. Things have changed drastically since the early years of biodiesel. It was just a great idea in the beginning, but it was very spotty in execution. And now biodiesel has become a real thriving business where biodiesel is made to exact specifications, and it's handled in a whole different way than it used to be. So if you've had experience or heard the stories of past experience with biodiesel, we understand why, but it really is a whole different thing than it used to be. You can see the picture of our biodiesel. It's clear, beautiful. It's beautiful biodiesel. It's no smell. It really is a great product. It's almost too bad we can't run 100% all the time up here. It really is nice. And I think most our customers, once they, like Jeff said, they struggle through the decision, they certainly don't want to end up with a problem or gelling or anything else, which we